Hello and welcome to the PocketGamer.biz podcast Week in Mobile Games, where we discuss the big news of the week and provide some insights. I'm Craig Chapple, head of content at PocketGamer.biz. We're having a bit of a festive edition today. We're all in Christmas jumpers and clothing. If your audio listeners will explain. Welcome to the podcast for this week, Paige, our deputy editor, and Aaron Astle, our news editor. How are you both doing? Paige, what have you been up to?
Yeah, I'm good. It's been a busy week. It's my last full working week of the year, which sounds a bit crazy, but yeah, it's come around very quickly. I was supposed to go to my first Christmas market at the weekend because my partner had family visiting, but there was a really bad storm, so there was no Christmas market. We made do anyway. It was nice, but yeah, just getting in the festive spirit now, I think. Well, I say that I'm sat here in a Santa hat, so I'm definitely in the festive spirit.
Very much in the festive spirit. And what's your Christmas jumper? It's
It
like
was just a normal
polka
one. It
dots.
has got
Yeah.
it has got little reindeers on it, but I was like, you can't see it enough, so I put the hat on.
Looking very festive indeed. And Aaron, what have you been up to? I like your shirt.
Yeah, thank you. I was just saying, it's the first time I've ever worn this shirt, so I hope everyone feels
How long have you had
quite
it?
privileged. Not very long, to be fair. There's just not been an occasion yet. I say
By
some of them
not
I've had
very
for
long.
years, but pardon?
You've had it for years.
Some of my Christmassy ones I've had for years, and they have been worn possibly once. I don't wear Christmassy stuff very often, but I thought,
Only at Christmas.
what better time to start than on the PocketGamer.biz Christmas podcast?
Indeed.
But yeah, so I've been quite busy getting geared up for Christmas. Feel really quite behind this year. Still don't have the tree up, no decorations. Feel very sort of accidentally Scrooge-y this year. I'm too busy doing all the present stuff to get anything else organised. Get in there gradually.
You're too busy being practical, Aaron.
That's a nice way of putting it.
You know, all that other stuff can wait. You're thinking of other people.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're off for a well-earned holiday as well from next week as well. So that's plenty of time, hopefully.
Yes, the tree should be up before Christmas Eve this year.
And as for myself, so my cat was going to join us on the podcast, and as soon as it came to me, Gizmo's like, nah, actually, I've had enough. This week I played Dungeons and Dragons, believe it or not, for the first time ever. So that was hosted by Oscar Clark, who's been on the show a couple times, and that was really fun, actually. And at first I was kind of actually a bit nervous. Most people have played it before. There's a group of us. And I don't really know what I'm doing at all. I couldn't even log in to D&D Beyond at first, and then as we were charged with protecting a museum at night. That was the story. And whilst we were in there, we ended up opening all the doors, setting off all the alarms. We ended up fighting these smoke demons or something, and everyone's trying to fight them with an axe, a sword. And I was like, oh, hang on, there must be something in this room. We can't just keep trying to fight like air with swords. So I thought I was quite clever, and I managed to find a gem. And then there was a clue, and all I had to do, I think I could have even said out loud to people these 3 words, like, oh, everyone, it says this. And then that would have won the day. I didn't do that. And so in that world, no one actually knew what the clue was, for starters. And then I got knocked out. So the game went on for half hour longer than it needed to. And thankfully, someone managed to. A third person picked up the gem because the second one forgot what the clue was, who was right next to me. Anyway, D&D, very
Sounds
good fun.
like a success.
Yeah, and it was good fun. And also the Christmas spirit, if you can't see, I'm wearing a Christmas jumper that's Star Wars themed, says Merry Sithmas. Right.
It's a very nice jumper.
Thank you. We're all in the festive spirit, I love it. Right, so a few shout-outs before we start. So this year's been a really good year for our events, and but we're doing plenty next year. So really quick, PGC London, our biggest one, January 20th to 21st. And then we'll go to San Francisco for PGC, March 17th to 18th. Got the Dubai Game Expo Summit, May 7th, May 8th. We're doing Barcelona for the first time in June, dates TBC. PGC Helsinki, October 7th to 8th. And we may do some other stuff as well, because we're not busy enough. And then also at London, we're going to be doing I said before, we're doing a top 30 UK game makers list. We've now turned that into a top 50 game makers list. We're working on that. We'll announce it at the show. That's enough shilling. This week, instead of, like I said, actually doing the week's news, The news has actually been fairly quiet, other than Zynga sold Chart Boost to LoopMe, which is an interesting deal. They bought that a few years ago. I want to say they bought it for 250 million, and then eventually they get bought by Take-Two. It was an interesting deal because of data companies kind of merging with publishers, like one way or the other. I'm wondering if we're seeing those split apart a bit more now, because I think AppLovin's probably going to break up a little bit by the sounds of it. We'll see. So it could be that could be a trend for next year. But this year, so for this podcast, we're going to focus on what are like some of the big trends of the past year. We're going to go through a bunch of those. One quick stat before we jump to Aaron with the first big trend is that technically it's a big trend. The industry is back to growth this year overall. We'll kind of go a bit more into detail on, maybe not everyone's feeling that. But importantly, the mobile games industry, App Store and Google Play revenue, it's growing again. So in the first 11 months of the year, the sector grew by 5.3%, according to AppMagic estimates, to $54.6 billion in net revenue. And that's about $78 billion gross revenue. And that still leaves another month. So, yeah, good news after what's been a difficult couple of years. But Aaron, you've got some interesting insights into how the industry's been growing, what's been changing.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about sort of changes in the top grossing games list particularly. So while like Honor of Kings has remained on top overall in 2024, 3 games have entered the top 10 this year, according to AppMagic. Those being Last War Survivor, Whiteout Survival, and Dungeon and Fighter Mobile. The latter being the only like brand new game from this year, as it released in China. There's been a few kind of movements in that top 10 list. Yeah, one new entry in there. Slightly less movement than last year. So in 2023, 4 new games entered the top 10 grossing list. So that was Royal Match, Monopoly Go, Honkai Star Rail, and Gardenscapes. Obviously, Monopoly Go and Honkai Star Rail were both new, like entirely new games last year. 4 new games entered last year. Some of them have fallen back out, like Honkai Star Rail is no longer in the top 10. I believe it's 12th now. But yeah, a newcomer in Dungeon and Fighter Mobile. And yeah, so a decrease from last year, but also an increase over 2022 when only 2 games entered the top 10 list and they ranked 9th and 10th, which was Monster Strike and Homescape. And neither of those were new releases. Yeah, the past 2 years, there's been at least 1 game that is brand new to that year that's made it into the top 10, which I think is quite noteworthy. Sort of shows there's still room to reach players with new games, and perhaps more importantly, that newer games, even if they aren't brand new, can kind of rise year on year and make it up to those charts or tops of the charts. At the same time, it's sort of noteworthy that besides Dungeon and Fighter, which as I say has done really well in China, RPGs have sort of fallen off. Because Honkai Star Rail is no longer in the top 10. Genshin Impact isn't in the top 10. Zenless Zone Zero is obviously Hoya versus new release. That didn't break into the top 10. So it does seem like RPGs have kind of been on the decline. And instead, we're sort of seeing a bit of a rise for the strategy genre. I said Whiteout Survival moved up into the top 10 list. So it's 8th at the moment. And notably, Last War Survivor is up 530 places from where it ranked in 2023. And it's now in 6th, which is obviously a huge increase. Done very well. And sort of one final kind of subject within this that I wanted to cover was, Dungeon and Fighter Mobile is really the big hit of the year. It's the only new game released to surpass 1 billion on iOS. And I think it was last week we were saying it could well have hit 2 billion or more when factoring in like Android stores in China. But there have been other games that have done really well this year, even if they're not in the top 10 against all the kind of legacy giants. So like Joy Nice Games' Legend of Mushroom was the second biggest new release. So that launched globally in March and it's made about 500 million so far. So obviously quite far behind Dungeon and Fighter, but still 500 million very good going. But it does seem this year like you really needed to be an Asian company to get anywhere really in these kind of higher rankings. I've got a feature in progress at the moment, which may be out by the time this podcast goes live. But in short, the top 10 like brand new games that released this year were all developed in Asia. Sorry, not just China, but in like Japan, Korea. Yeah, they're all Asian, and it's the only company to have released a game in the top 15 was Supercell, and that was with Squad Busters, which ranked 14th. So there were no other Western game developers in the top 15 like new games this year, which is quite noteworthy, I think.
I find that just a mad statistic, like a data point, I guess.
Mm.
And Supercell obviously owned by Tencent anyway, so
Yeah.
technically a subsidiary. But yeah, I remember I had this chat with someone at GDC. They were kind of investor and either currently worked or had been working with a top publisher there. They gave some interesting viewpoints. They were actually talking more about AAA, but I guess it kind of feeds into this, which was that Western companies, in their view, they are going to really struggle to compete now, even more so with companies in Asia, particularly China, because now that they've got to the level where these are actually like proper kind of Call of Duty style, like Call of Duty level, kind of what you think of when you think of a AAA game. And they can put, I mean, like thousands of workers to work on that. And you can't actually replicate that cost. You can't replicate that team size and that cost structure in the West right now. You know, particularly if you've got a studio based in San Francisco, like good luck. And I think, and I'm not here to say that these things are right or wrong, but there is obviously, and it's controversial in China, the working culture, which is, what is it, like 9 to 9, kind of 6-7 days a week you're working. Not saying that's everywhere, but that's like one of the kind of controversial things that's kind of been in the news. And again, you can't really compete with that in the West, especially with this kind of people talking about crunch and obviously that big issue. So yeah, I guess we'll see more of this in future, and obviously a lot of these Chinese publishers also just very cash rich and can invest a lot and have found a way to find global success. And maybe this is actually a sign, just the last thing, of a lot of the creativity maybe is happening in Asia, in China.
I think as well on that creativity point, it's worth noting a lot of the sort of top 10, top 15 games that I'm sort of covering in this feature that I'm working on. Quite a lot of them are new IPs. So obviously there is more kind of creativity in making a brand new thing, and then they've gone on to find success without the brand power of something that came before them. But like in the top 5 for the year, I think Dungeon and Fighter and Pokemon trading card game Pocket are the only like pre-existing IPs to my knowledge. The others are Legend of Mushroom, Love and Deep Space, and Zenless Zone Zero. Again, although like Hoyoverse is kind of a brand in itself at this point with Genshin and Honkai Star Rail, obviously Zenless Zone Zero is technically a new IP. It's doing its own thing. So yeah, I think the creativity point is quite a strong one there. That yeah, there are a lot of games that are doing well that are kind of forming their own IPs.
And actually, you think about end of year, some of the top new releases. I guess firstly, Royal Kingdom is top new release potentially. Obviously, that's not Asia. That's from the Turkish developer Dream Games. But what are the other big games that have come out? You mentioned Pokemon TCG. That's Japan with DNA. Delta Force could be a big game, cross-platform. From Tencent, you've got Infinity Nikki in Fold, a big release to Asia, and Marvel Rivals, not mobile, but that's out. That's Asia as well, I believe. So yeah, everywhere, kind of cross-platform. Not so much currently in the West. Really interesting. So thanks for that, Aaron. So we're going to go to a slightly more depressing topic, but Paige, What have you got for trends?
So first up from me is it's a bit of a depressing one, but I don't think we can talk about 2024 and trends and not mention obviously layoffs, which we have had so many this year. I know we had some, in the last few years, but this year in particular, we've had a lot. There's been, Playtika, Microsoft, Sony, EA, Unity. I think when I was looking through the list, like there's just unfortunately there's too many to go through. With each kind of one, obviously you get the sort of statement of, there's some sort of restructuring in place, but that's down to, back from obviously a lot of companies sort of had massive expansions over the pandemic and now it's catching up. We've got rising costs. We've got, the just players and how they spend, that's changing. So yeah, there's just been a whole host of reasons that are behind these layoffs. And I think like one of the things for me as well is obviously layoffs are awful and people lose their jobs. But I think it's just a wider thing as well because those that lose their jobs, you then run the risk of them going into completely different industries. They just look completely outside of games and we lose a bunch of talent. And then there's also the risk that the people that keep their jobs, just because they've kept them, it doesn't mean that they feel secure. So yeah, I just think that it's been one of those years that, it's felt very unstable and, you can't help but feel for so many people and then just think, it just feels like it's kind of on shaky ground. I know we've mentioned quite a few times on the podcast about this whole survive to 25 thing. I would like to think that that's what we need to do and we're nearly there. But I do think, we're not going to get to 2025 and all of a sudden all of the bad things stop. There may still be some layoffs, but I hope for the most part that the worst of it is behind us and sort of 2025 can at least be the beginning of the year that a lot of these companies start to maybe rebuild and find a way for sustainable growth that lasts for the long term now.
Yeah, hopefully, like some of the big publishers, they've kind of completed their layoffs. I think the Ubisoft situation, who knows what's going to happen there? That could get worse just because of the state of potentially taking it private and whatever that means for the changes that they want to enforce. I feel like towards the end of 2024 was supposed to be the year that things kind of got better initially, right? And that did not happen. Or the industry is coming back to growth as we said, but I think yeah, not everyone's feeling that, right? And then towards the end of the year, we just ended up seeing more and more layoffs, it felt like. But interestingly, at the same time, we spoke to Michael Metzger from Drakestar Partners. And obviously, if you look at the data, and we were reporting lots of stories about investments and funding, it seems to be slowly picking up. I think there's certain stages of investment where it's still tremendously difficult, but there is a pickup there and maybe into 2025. And we've seen some funds raise quite a lot of money. Play Ventures, I think, raised, I want to say 140 million to deploy. There's a lot of money coming out of the Middle East, whether in Saudi and the UAE. There's a lot of money sloshing around, and there's some other funds. And some startups like ex Supercell startups been picking up some money. Bitod raised $17-18 million. Zara keeps buying everyone. Cool. There's things happening. We'll see if that continues into next year. But to get back to the layoffs point, hopefully that is part of the recovery to next year. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was AI, which I maybe kind of feeds into the layoff stuff, but I feel like AI. I mean, everybody's obviously been talking about it this year, generative AI in particular. I feel like it's a trend that's kind of been, in a way, in games, bubbling under somewhat. It feels a bit like Web3 and the metaverse at the moment, but how do I put it? Not as bad or as buzzy as that. By that I mean, again, like Web3 and metaverse, there's a lot of startups in development on the tech side trying to use generative AI. I think there ultimately are some practical uses. Whatever I think of ChatGPT, I'll get into that on something else a bit later. But ultimately, there are some practical uses, even if they could be fairly simple or they just help you get information. Elsewhere, we kind of see like AppLovin kind of calling out AI in the UA space, and I think in UA that is a kind of, for ad creatives, that's becoming quite an interesting tool. I've definitely noticed games in soft launch that have curious imagery and app icons that are most definitely AI generated. And I remember there was one in particular that made me laugh. It was a farming game. And you can tell just by the eyes, they're like really off. And I think some of the animals in the background just looked like something from Fallout. John Wright, we asked for his predictions. So next year we're going to run predictions per podcast, but he said he thinks at least 50% of the game will be made with AI next year. Was that like a top game, I think, that he was saying? And I think there's definitely already been some use of AI already, and maybe that has already been leading to layoffs. That could be playing a part. I think as much as people have been saying, oh, no, it's to improve like efficiency, so people we won't lay off people. We'll keep hiring. It just means you could do more. It's like, is that really what we're saying? Like, if you're an executive there, I don't think you're thinking of these amazing tools and being like, oh, well, now we can just hire more people to make even bigger games. I feel like it's a bit disingenuous when I hear that. But the other big thing about AI that's kind of been a trend, and you can see the controversy around it, is obviously the SAG-AFTRA strikes. So voice actors are striking at the moment, and specifically it's about the use of AI and protecting people's work. And I think the fact that publishers haven't relented is telling. So it kind of goes back to my point about costs. Like, if you don't have to pay constantly to get someone into the recording studio and pay them royalties after as well, etc. Like, if you don't have to do any of that, you get them in once, copy their voice, and you've got that forever. It will cut costs, right? And I think that I don't know what the publishers are thinking, but as a guess, that's got part of it. And I think obviously with some top AAA games, you'll still get actors kind of coming in doing their performances, no matter what happens. Say with this deal, but yeah, for small side characters and side quests, I could see why publishers kind of want to take advantage of this technology. So it's an interesting trend. I think as John Wright kind of said, I think we're going to see more of that potentially next year. Be interesting to see if AI has reached its apex already. Generative AI tools specifically, it's got to reach its apex already. I heard this term. It's like mad currently for like chat for a text-based at least. It's kind of like mad cow disease. So they spent years ripping off all of these websites for all of the data that they're worth. Didn't pay anyone a thing, and then now they're kind of learning from each other. And so you might end up getting some really warped results from ChatGPT. There's some other stuff I want to say in a bit. Yeah, I think AI has been an interesting trend this year, but I think we'll see more next year.
I don't think it's a trend that's going anywhere. It's more just a case of how it kind of evolves, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Funnily enough, with the AI, like voice actor stuff, there was a trailer for some new characters coming to Fire Emblem Heroes, which I play. Been playing it for nearly 8 years, which is a bit crazy. But one of those, the normal voice actor of one of the characters, I think is part of the strikes. So they've just left the Japanese voice in at the moment and just said they're going to replace it basically when the voice actress comes back, which is a bit weird. But yeah, so I don't know if that's kind of a sign, at least with a game like that they can just carry on without them, which is a bit depressing if so. But
it's definitely having an impact because you notice that as a player, right? You're not supposed to notice these things. So, Aaron, you've got another trend for us with regulatory changes.
Yeah, so particularly the Digital Markets Act, which came into effect across the EU. It was March 7th this year that it came in. So obviously, it was quite big news at the time. Ultimately, it still feels kind of unclear how much of an impact it's really had so far. A survey by Aghanim back in March found that a third of developers were already implementing changes at that time, like in preparation for the DMA, but only 9% were actually confident that the DMA would mean they'd ultimately get to keep more revenue. And yeah, like 9 months later, they don't really feel like there have been any kind of groundbreaking consequences from the DMA. Like we've talked before, Microsoft still kind of seems like they're faffing around with the Xbox App Store. Epic Games Store had 10 million downloads on mobile. The last we sort of got an update on that. And obviously, web shops are becoming a bigger thing. Like 100% of the top social casino games have a web shop now, according to AppChart. But obviously, that was a trend we were starting to see before the DMA, even if it's sort of scaled up since then. So yeah, obviously it's been a major thing this year that still feels very much sort of in its infancy as to what impact it's really going to have.
I think the DMA is already making a difference. I think in terms of, because obviously Apple keeps appealing or just not seemingly not really complying to what the law wants to achieve. And so the European Commission is always playing is still constantly kind of playing catch up, and Apple seems to change its rules. They get more absurd each time. I think we wrote a newsletter on it. Like, I don't understand some of it. If I gun to my head, I wouldn't be able to tell you unless I read it. Some of the later changes that they made. I remember I spent like an hour just looking at it when I was trying to report it last time. Like, what does this mean? But anyway, I think like there's just been like this year. There's just been a lot more significant chinks in the armor, I guess, and of the big platforms. And the result of that so far, I think, is that Xbox. I don't know what on earth Xbox is doing, but they are at least allegedly preparing a marketplace. Maybe they wouldn't be doing that if these things weren't in motion. Epic, obviously, it's been fighting its fight and it's had a setback in the US. So Google was ruled to be an illegal monopoly, but Google Play. But that's the injunction on that has now been stayed, I think, is it? Whilst an appeal goes through, I think is the latest on that. But they've ultimately but back in Europe, the DMA has allowed them to, in some form, ridiculous charges that Apple sets to release a store to get, and like you said, get 10 million downloads. Again, wouldn't have been able to do that realistically a couple of years ago. So it doesn't feel like it, I think, by the time you get to the end of the year. But if you actually think where we were 2 years ago, I'd say it's a pretty significant trend. There's other mobile marketplaces that have launched or are launching. And I think the word is out now on, I mean, it's been out for a long time, but just how much money you can potentially make. I'm not saying this is a growth area, really, but it's making more money from the players that you got from web stores. Again, it all kind of pushes that way, and developers, at least till things have been opening up, have been found ways to get their communities to kind of go to their own stores anyway. So I'd say it's been overall. I don't think it's where people want it to be at all, and it could take years still for like Apple and Google to really open up fully to third-party stores without extra fees to get away from the 30%, etc. But we've come a long way, and I think a lot has happened. So next up, Paige, you've got another trend for us.
I wanted to talk about cross-platform because obviously, cross-platform games, they've been a thing for a while. It's not like it's this new thing. But I do feel like in 2024, we've seen it sort of, accelerate even more, particularly in mobile. There's a lot more games now that release on mobile that from the get-go also on another platform, whether it's console or PC. And even if they don't release straight away, it might be, it's mobile first, and then, within 6 months or so, they release it over PC as well. A lot of what we were just talking about as well with obviously, regulation changes across mobile. I think it has just been that option of, well, let's just release elsewhere as well, so we can kind of sidestep some of these issues that we're seeing. But yeah, I think that it's an interesting trend. It's one I personally, as a gamer, am also a fan of. Gamers, we want convenience, more accessibility. It's part of the reason why mobile is so popular, because it's easy. So, I think with like Infinity Nikki, it's great that that's on mobile. You can sort of chip away at it on there, and then, if you want to go on your PS5, you can pick up the experience there. So yeah, I think that, this year we've seen more of it. You can't put a cat in front of the camera and me not be like, cat. So, oh no.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, Gizmo has appeared.
I got very distracted because there's a cute cat on the screen.
He's not wearing something Christmassy though.
Yeah, Gizmo's not wearing his Christmas jumper.
But yeah, anyway, back from my distraction. I think that next year we'll see more games that release cross-platform. I do kind of think that as time goes on, it is going to be one of those things that is less of a quirky feature that you have and maybe more of a necessity. Like I said, gamers are kind of greedy. We want to play everything everywhere on all of the devices that we own. So yeah, it's kind of how like with like cross progression in games and cross play. Years ago you would have never thought playing Call of Duty against, if you're on PlayStation, you wouldn't have thought about playing it against Xbox. Whereas now, if it didn't have that, everyone would kind of be outraged by it. So I do kind of wonder if cross-platform will go a similar way. People will just expect a game comes out and they can play it where they want to. And then, cloud gaming, things like that adds a whole another level to it. That's a different trend in of itself. But yeah, obviously there's challenges that come with developing for cross-platform. There's a lot more you have to factor in, but I think that it is just going to continue to be bigger as the years go on.
Yeah, I think it's been a major trend, and that it's notable that some of the recent games that we were just talking about earlier, Infinity Nikki is cross-platform. Obviously, Genshin Impact Honkai Star Rail cross-platform. Delta Force is going to be available on mobile. I think it's already available in China. I believe it's out now on PC, maybe consoles. I want to say January 20th. I've made that number up, but I think it's correct.
That's the number that's in my head as well.
That is coming out of mobile. So again, another cross-platform. It seems to be, for those that can do it, a really interesting option. Cloud gaming, yeah, that I don't think that's much of a trend at all for games at the moment. I wouldn't even say that's a prediction for 2025, to be honest. All right, thanks for that, Paige. So there's a few that I wanted to do, and I guess I've got to be picky. Well, I'm not going to be. I'm going to go through some very quickly, and then one that I kind of wanted to just talk about just because. So very quickly, one of the trends of the year, hybrid casual. Now, I guess go back to a couple of years ago, the debate of, is hyper casual dead? Is it dying? It was dying because of the privacy changes, made it very difficult to kind of get the scale you need and generate the ad revenue. It kind of just basically destroyed that model. So income hybrid casual that we said on this podcast before, my opinion is well, it came from sort of popularized, I guess, from Javi's Archero. That's where hybrid casual comes from as a term in the industry. And so now you've just tried to make this a thing. After years of it not working, by the way, no one could replicate it. And suddenly hybrid casual is dead. And you're like, oh man, better make this a thing. Turns out, baby, there's been very good successes. So Voodoo, Say Games, Homa, some others. Happy is back now with Capybara Go. They've really forced this thing into existence. So far succeeded. So that has been a really interesting trend of the year. And actually, the interesting thing about hyper casual, we spoke about the rise of strategy games earlier. And Last War really effectively combined hyper casual gameplay. So the gating, I think it's the gating mechanics at the start, which you see in a lot of ads now, which are really interesting to watch for some reason. Mostly because of the failure thing, and you think you can do better, blah blah. But they added that as like a core gameplay loop, and then they bring you into the bit that makes them the money from in-app purchases, which is the 4x strategy, and the combination of that did well. So there's been a very big evolution of hyper casual, either using those gameplay elements to also help bring in users and monetize these other games. That's one trend. The other trend is hybrid casual. I was at Think Gaming. I've gone on this topic for too long. I was going to do this. I was at Think Gaming Istanbul earlier this year, and then which was a great show. And then I apologize, I can't remember the name of it, but it was hosted by 2.5 Gamers. They did an evening kind of summit, get together networking, and a few talks, which was really insightful and interesting. One of the things, and I think Matei and Jakub specifically were talking about, you can kind of use, developers could be launching, maybe have been, launch a hyper casual game, see how it does, but with the mind of, that you can kind of develop this idea further. And then so you start developing it to hyper casual, and then you might eventually, after a long time, bring it up into another genre, as we would define it, but into casual to midcore. So That's been an interesting trend this year, and I think we'll see more of that next year. And then I'll try and do these ones quick. I wrote a piece earlier this year, everything is a games platform, which is definitely true. I've actually got very well sucked into New York Times games now on web. I actually can't get enough. Connections really annoys me, though, because it's very US focused, so sometimes I'm like, I don't know what this is. But a friend of mine got me into that, so I played that, Strands, Letterboxd, Wordle, obviously. And yeah, really good. And then obviously LinkedIn became a games platform. Discord became a games platform again. We'll see if any of these stick with it. I've said before about how big platforms, especially social platforms, they think, well, we already have lots of users. Here's another way to engage them and make money. So, well, Facebook Instant Games is back. I was about to criticize it. It's now back because of App Store rules. It kind of gets all a bit better. But Facebook kind of steps away. Now they're back just because actually, I guess, regulation and maybe Apple is kind of opening up. Discord sold games, left it. Now they're having games on the actual platform. Really, Snap, when its games left it, haven't come back. But yeah, everything is games platform. Telegram and browser gaming, HTML5 is probably the big thing this year. One of the major trends. Telegram has just exploded into life. So we'll be reporting more on that, and I think next year it could be big. I think one of the issues is that potentially a lot of the usage that you see from games, you see numbers like tens of millions are playing this, but maybe like a significant proportion of those are actually bots. So how popular it actually is for games, popular enough, I think. But yeah, HTML5's rise, I remember reporting on it over a decade ago, maybe 12 years ago, of how it was going to be a thing. Never happened. And now it's here. Exciting. It's probably part of a push away from the platform holders as well. Big trend. Are publishers leaving games behind? I've got two more trends, everyone, don't worry. Are publishers leaving games behind? I just found the concept interesting that the biggest publishers in the world are expanding away. So EA has got the EA Sports app, which is like kind of catching up on your football scores and your teams. And I think they just want to build a community within that, which is away from their actual big, and I've forgotten the name of it again, FC Sports, FIFA. I don't know, my brain just can't accept this. EA Sports FC something. And so they kind of got away from that and into this other area, which we'll see if it does well. But it's a fascinating idea. And then you've had Krafton investing, can't remember the money now, 60, 70, $80 million into Spoon Labs, which has a live streaming and podcast platform, Spoon, and launched a short form video service, Vigloo. That's their largest investment into a non-gaming company. So Krafton makes PUBG. Now they're doing short video. Remember Quibi? Apparently it's actually popular in China. Again, just another company doing that. Voodoo has two social apps. They acquired Be Real this year. I Got Games, which does Lords Mobile. They say apps is a major growth driver. They didn't say the name, which I believe is the link messaging platform that they have. And then Pokemon Sleep, technically not a game. Lots of things going on. So I think that's been an interesting trend from some companies. Maybe we'll see more of that. You know, we're already seeing transmedia. That was a big trend. Nearly forgot that one. Transmedia was a big thing this year, and I feel like this feeds into that. Right, last one. But this is the one that I just wanted to talk about because it's been a big thing recently. I just wanted to talk about like the state of games media, I guess, particularly B2B. So in the UK, I used to work on Develop magazine, and its sister magazine was MCV. So MCV was like a trade weekly for retail that sort of evolved into doing more for publishers. Develop was very much game development. Think of like Gamasutra, which now game developer, kind of like that, but hardcore, really into the tools, tech, programming. And then what's the point I'm trying to make? That there used to be massive brands. They're still going. They run like notable events. Not really what they were, to be honest. GamesIndustry.biz has just lost all of its senior staff. So Ziff Davis, the owner, their revenue was down 10%, I believe, since 2021, something like that. And so they offered voluntary redundancies across the entire company, which obviously people have taken up. Ultimately, it's really bad. Hey, games industry kind of a competitor to us, yeah. But do I want to see them go away? Absolutely not. We need strong B2B brands. And if there's no suggestion of this currently, other than that they're letting all the senior staff leave. So they've lost the publisher, the editor-in-chief, deputy editor, and other people. There's one full-time person. They are hiring for a director. I think it's just a weird space in the media right now. So if I just attempt to quickly go into the history. The move from print to online. So I guess I joined during this, so maybe I probably don't know all the details about it. But if I give a very basic comment, the move from print to online was tough. So it has not been as lucrative as magazine ads, to my knowledge. And then with online in recent years, another problem the media faces is Google is basically, well, they change things all the time. And so people kind of try to chase the algorithm with SEO and that. And there's debates on that. I don't really like SEO, but I think consumer has to do it. B2B doesn't. But they're basically stopping Google being a search engine, and it's just more of a money-making machine. And it feels like they're just kind of like Facebook has. Twitter's absolutely useless. You've lost some social thing, media outreach. Facebook's useless. And it feels like they're just closing the tap like Facebook did. Anyway, I just wonder what the future is to get users from search engines, which is at Google is where you get most of your traffic. Do you need to start running like UA style just to get readers, which is it doesn't seem in any way a sustainable model for that. And I'm really getting off topic a bit, but I just thought it was worth noticing because I'm curious how things like ChatGPT is going to work in the future, so, especially with their deals with media publishers to train on their stories and also to kind of exclusively surface information. So ChatGPT had a deal with Future Publishing. Here they do Edge magazine. So I'm starting to wonder if say ChatGPT kind of sort of became the next Google, then it seems like your answers, one, they don't lead to the website. Secondly, they come from paid partners. So you again, it's kind of like paying to appear in search results. Or they pay money to you and go, look, we'll get you to appear in our search results. Hooray, but we want all of your stuff to feed our algorithm. It's like the mafia talking. This is going to be good for you as they slowly destroy your company from the inside. Anyway, got a few tangents. But media's evolved quite a lot. And I think about a decade ago, the events was kind of the way forward. We tried to do that at Develop, and now they have, like I said, some successful events. Pocket Gamer obviously got in early-ish, and we've been really successful with Pocket Gamer Connects. We're growing next year. One of the media trends this year, previous years, is kind of splitting off into newsletters, smaller sites, maybe run by like one person, podcasts, etc. Industry experts have formed their own outlets quite effectively. You've got Deconstructor Fun and Narvik, which I guess part of that, like, if you're talking about revenue generation, consultancy is probably how they generate a lot of their money. And it's also just good for, if you're on those, just for personal brand, it helps you get opportunities. So that's their kind of model, I guess. Doesn't work for a journalist media outlet, that, because you can't be that close to be a consultant, I think. What does that leave us, I guess? I think if more B2B sites disappear, and I don't think there's a massive pipeline for journalists to replace what's being lost. And then I think what happens is that people come in and then they kind of get, well, either the site shuts down more recently, so they're forced to kind of look elsewhere, or media's not that well paid, right? So you just kind of get sucked into elsewhere. It's a massive problem. If GI closed, we're going to lose all that history, just gone, which is insane. And then some of the issues, this is more prediction now, but I'll close with this. Kind of where are companies going to promote themselves in future, their services, their job vacancies? Where are they going to announce their next big thing? If you lose the B2B sites, there's nowhere to go. Slim pickings currently. So maybe they still don't see the value. That's obviously a media problem. Yeah, not everyone can just shout about things on LinkedIn to get noticed. And all these newsletters that have popped up. So every single company under the sun runs a newsletter now, and they round up the news. Where are you going to get that? Where are you going to get that news from? If the B2B sites weren't there, well, there's not many. You're going to have less. You're going to have less to say. You won't have nothing to say. You can still find news elsewhere. But point is, it's not good. Anyway, I just wanted to have a bit of a moan at the end about the state of media. And in the end, I obviously would say this man who works in media says, please support the media. But it is important. If you want obviously, now that's not to say there's not valid criticisms of why these business models don't work, and I can't just say advertise PocketGamer.biz or wherever, but then the KPIs you get are rubbish. I don't know, on any of these B2B sites, is my point. So there's things to work out there still, but in the end, you should really support media outlets, otherwise you're going to lose them, and it's already happening. That's my passion
I
point.
wonder how much of that is to do with like YouTube as well, because I know I get a lot of my kind of news from my interests, at least. I know that's maybe more consumery, but a lot of that is people on YouTube reading articles to me rather than me have to go and find the articles and read them myself. Which again isn't sustainable if that means, you know, those news sources, you know, they're not getting the viewer figures then to keep themselves going. But yeah, I do wonder how much that sort of thing does impact it. So I think like the whole content creator influencer thing is kind of only getting bigger as far as I know. And, you know, these multi-million subscriber channels where people just go to them because, you know, they know the face, whereas you don't necessarily get that as much with, you know, a news article, other than the little picture and name at the top when you start reading. Yeah, I do wonder how much of it's down to the more personal connection you get on YouTube, even if that is people just reading someone else's news.
You make a really good point. Less people read now, right?
I was literally talking about this at the weekend. Like, people don't read as much now. Even when you go on an article, it will tell you, like, oh, this is going to take you 3 minutes to read. Or do you want to read it? Do you just want to click this button and we'll read it to you? Like, people's lives are busy and people haven't got time to read articles, apparently. So, no, I do think, like what you said, Aaron, part of it is also video. And even that's evolving. It's not just video now, it's short videos. Like, people want things given to them in like 30 seconds. So, yeah, I think there is just that little shift in video wanting things very quickly given to you.
There could be it could be that I've been slow to react to some things, definitely, on a personal level, and there are other ways to kind of deliver content that sites perhaps aren't delivering. But yeah, it isn't it, like, to my friends, I send them a link and they call me old. I'm the same age. They call me old now. They're like, literally, sorry, my cat's arrived just for the end of the podcast, everybody. He heard me moaning and he was just like, shut up, it's been an hour. you just spoke for 20 minutes. I can't remember what I was going to say. Oh, one of my friends, I sent them a link. Why are you sending me a link? Don't have time to read. Just send me a screenshot. And then they're all starting calling me old. I was like, all right, jeez.
I send links if that helps at all as the Gen Z representative.
And what do your friends think of that? Do they read it, or they're like, why didn't you just send me the screenshot of the headline?
I don't know if they end up reading it, but they don't call me out.
Why didn't you just send it in like hologram format, like links? It's got to be something futuristic. Send it to my VR headset, please.
Yeah, as a meme as well. Only.
Yes.
I think because people like to consume content as well, like while they're working as well, right? You want to just spend the time to read. Anyway, but that is a really interesting trend, and I guess maybe a good one to close out on. So that is our final week in mobile games of the year. So thank you everyone for tuning in this year. The podcast has grown a lot. I don't actually have the stats in front of me. I'll throw them on LinkedIn or Spotify Wrapped. But yeah, we've grown a lot, and we really appreciate your support and listening. We hope you find it interesting. As always, please do send us feedback. Anything that we should be changing, like in the new year, we can always do things differently. So we're just keen for people to say what they think, I guess. But yeah, thank you so much, Aaron, for being on the podcast this week.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a fun year. Looking forward to doing it all again come January.
And thank you very much, Paige, as well, being on this, and been a really good year for the show.
Yeah, it's been a fun year doing this, and we had a nice festive one to end things.
Exactly. So I'll see everyone on the Infinity Nikki podcast. But otherwise, for everyone, have a great Christmas. Enjoy the holidays. Have a good New Year, and the week in mobile games will be back in 2025. Would you believe? And we're going to jump into predictions. I think the first one that we'll do next year. So yeah, from all of us, goodbye. It's from Gizmo. He says goodbye and have a good one.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.